The Faith and Fishing podcast is sponsored by 413 Lure Company. 413 Lure Company is a family-owned and operated business that puts Christ first and does things the right way. Using really high-quality components, they make some really awesome spinnerbaits, buzzbaits, bladed swim jigs, and more in some really sweet color combinations. Check them out on Facebook to see what they can do and place your order today. Welcome to the Faith and Fishing podcast, where you get to hear all kinds of fishermen tell their stories and share their faith. I'm your host, Cam Steele. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Faith and Fishing podcast. It's hard to believe that we're already on the 10th episode, but here we are. I want to give a big shout out to everyone who's been listening so far. We've got listeners right here in my North Carolina backyard and as far away as Norway and Germany. It's been very exciting to look at my analytics and see what cities, states, and yes, even countries y'all are listening from. And it means so much to me, and I want to say thank you. Keep in mind that if you are enjoying the podcast, go ahead and rate, review, and share the episodes so others can find us. If you would like to be a guest on the show, have someone in particular you'd like to hear from, or just have feedback or questions for me, you can reach out on Instagram at Faith and Fishing Pod, facebook.com/faithandfishingpodcast, or email me at faith@gmail.com. As always, we have a really awesome guest lined up for y'all this week. You probably recognize him from Brackish Coast Outdoors or from YouTube, where he's showing off what Savior Outdoors retrieval devices and Vibe kayaks can do. Here's Jeff Jones. Jeff, man, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. It is great to be on.
Absolutely. Well, so to get us started off, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about you and about Brackish Coast Outdoors.
All right, man. Well, my name is Jeff Jones, like you've already said, and I live on the Alabama Gulf Coast and fish in Mississippi more than anywhere, and I really love saltwater fishing, and that's kind of what brought me into Brackish Coast. I'm sure we'll get into it later on in the podcast, but church is a huge priority in my life, and music is too. And so actually my co-host, if you're familiar with Brackish Coast Outdoors, it's YouTube, podcasts, we have articles, videos on Facebook, Instagram, like it's just a whole conglomerate of, different content that we're putting out. And my co-host, Matt Farrell, we actually met because we play on the worship team together. I'm the bass player. He's a guitar player, and we went fishing one day, kayak fishing together one day, and he's a bass guy. Like, he's always been a freshwater guy. And we get together and we're arguing about, no, man, salt's better, bass is better, or whatever, that kind of argument. And then we just, decided to kind of work together and create content. And we came up with Brackish Coast because, we both love different fish and on different sides of the coastline. So it was just kind of a natural thing, man, after we met, and that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting you said you're the bass player in the worship team. I also am a bass player.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Always nice to get a chance to talk to another bassist.
Yeah, we don't get the love we need, man.
For sure. All right, so go ahead and let us know, how did you get into fishing?
Well, man, this one goes back a long ways. My whole family was pretty much lived on the coast and made a living off of the coast, the Gulf Coast here in Mississippi, for all of their lives. I mean, both my grandparents, my maternal grandparents and paternal, were watermen. Basic watermen down here. They oystered for food, shrimp for their food, fish for food, cast netted mullet. Like, that's how they ate, and that's how they survived. And they also thrived on it. Like, they even started their own businesses. My paternal grandfather had a mullet and oyster shop. So he would net these mullet and sell them commercially. And then he would also go and get oysters, and he would shuck them, and he had this booming oyster business until one of the hurricanes wiped out his shop. So man, it's just been a very I guess it's just kind of in my genes. Like it's just passed down from generation to generation. And it was just kind of a natural thing. Like I don't even remember my first fish or my first fishing memories. Like are already, I was already learning how to cast a rod and catching my own fish and that sort of thing. So like it was just a natural thing, man. I was pretty much, raised on the water fishing. So that's kind of how that started.
Absolutely, that's awesome. All right, so let's get into it. In a nutshell, tell us what you believe.
Well, man, this is kind of, this one goes, it depends, this is one of those, questions that throughout my life I've been like, a little indifferent about, because it's, man, depending on what point of my life you ask me in, it's completely different. But for the past like 10 years, man, I learned a lot through traveling and music and different things. And I just kind of just changed the way I believe and really dug down and actually got into it and started listening to God for myself and reading the Bible for myself and learning about the relationship with God. And man, I can wrap it up in 3 statements. There's only one way to God, and that's through the blood of Jesus Christ. And God loves me more than I'll ever understand. And there's nothing I can do for God not to love me. And that's my beliefs in a nutshell right there.
All right. So, tell us your story. How did you come to believe that, and how has that affected you?
So, my dad was actually a minister. He was a pastor for 17 years. So, and he was in the Assembly of God movement. I'm sure you've heard of that. But here in the South, if you're familiar with like the Bible Belt region, man, there's a lot of really religious people. And unfortunately, that's just what we were in at the time. It was like super religious. And I was basically brought up with a list of things not to do. And I'm not saying my parents, taught me that, because they weren't like strict religious people. They had a relationship with God. But the people we were associated with were very, very religious. And that's just kind of the upbringing I had, just a list of things not to do, that sort of thing. And then when I was a teenager, I got the chance to travel around the country, like with several different bands I was playing with. And we were playing Christian music. We were going to these different churches. And I started to see like the cultural differences in the South and the North and in the West, and like all these different ideas that people had, but they still were Christians. They still loved God. Like you could tell, and God was, working through them and whatnot. So I just got to thinking, I was like, man, maybe there's more to it than just like, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. Maybe there's more into it. And that's when I really started like seeking a relationship with a God that could actually have a relationship back with me and wasn't a judge per se. So that's kind of how that started. And man, it's a really long story, like to get into it. I know we don't have time to do all that, but, my wife played a big part in that too, of me like finding out what I believe. And it's completely like changing the way like we done church. Like we went from a church that was very strict and like, 3 services a week to one that had 1 service a week. And man, the people we were associated with, like just, it blew them away. They're like, man, they're a lost cause. They're gone. But it was the best thing I'd done for my family. And yeah. So
Yeah.
that's a quick wrap up on what it's that one gets deep.
All right, man. So, you mentioned having a relationship with God. So if any of our listeners don't really know what that means, can you kind of break that down for them?
Sure, man. Relationship with God, man. It's every morning you wake up, like you just got to be in tune. It's reading the Bible every morning, every evening, whenever the time is right for you. It's actually talking and listening to God, like not praying to, like, let's see, I guess maybe the way to understand, to explain it, it's not praying to like a God. It's praying to like a father, and praying to someone who loves you and you know they love you because of the blessings you get and the feelings you get and that sort of thing. And it's really neat, man, when you're, you know, actually listening. God will speak to you, you know, maybe not audibly, but through different things, you know, through the Bible especially, or, you know, through just random people like coming up and just, you know, saying something. And then like, well, I've been, you know, thinking about that for a while, and that's just confirmation, you know, of course that's from God, you know, stuff like that. And that's when like actually being able to listen to God's voice and hear things, you know, through nature, through other people, through the Bible, through podcasts, through preaching, whatever, you know, music, all that. And that's where like, that's the great thing about having a relationship with God. Like everything can speak to you, like regardless of what it's about or whatnot.
Absolutely. All right. So, kind of your own words, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to you to have faith?
Oh man, my faith is basically everything. It's who I am. You know, one of the things I always tell people, you know, I'm not a Christian fisherman, you know, or a Christian bass player, Christian husband, whatever like that. Like very first in my life, like without a doubt, 100%, I'm a Christian. And then secondly, I'm a husband. And then I'm a dad. And then I'm a musician. And then I'm a fisherman. So like everything is about priorities, and everything I do is thinking about, you know, how is this going to, you know, affect my family in the long run? How is this going to affect me in the long run? And man, I always pray for God's will, you know, whatever the situation is, whether we're buying a car or, you know, getting a house or any kind of decision, like it's always, you know, we got it in our mind, like, is this the best thing for us to do? Like faith wise, is this going to, you know, turn somebody off, you know, from the gospel or whatever that we're, you know, trying to portray, you know, if we do this, or will this bring us closer to God or further away? You know, that sort of thing. So faith, man, it's in everything we do. Like, and that's my family, that's me, my wife, and we're teaching that to our kids too. So.
Yeah, definitely. So, sorry, the dogs outside are going crazy. Um, so whenever you were, whenever you're kind of looking to God for guidance and trying to figure out what His will is, how do you know whenever He's given you an answer, and how do you know what that answer is?
How I know when He's giving me an answer, man. I probably say the easiest is just the peace I feel like in my heart, like, and it's hard to explain, like, you know, how to feel that peace or what you know the peace is. But like when I'm going into a decision, like recently, man, this is something recent that I can talk about. The pastor of our church, resigned, or he actually retired. He's been there 30 years. So he was just like, man, I'm tired. I'm ready to move on. And through that, like it was before we realized he was resigning or retiring. I'm sorry. I keep saying resigning, but he retired actually. Um, you know, it was really like, you know, what should we do? Should we leave the church? Like, and all these things. And we were really contemplating, man, me and my wife, we prayed about it a lot, and we really didn't have a peace, like trying to find another church or trying to, you know, go somewhere else. But we both like, man, every time, like she would turn on a podcast or I would turn on a podcast, or, you know, we'd listen to this or whatever. It was all about patience and just waiting. And like, we just heard that back and forth, like all the time. And finally, like we came to a decision, like we started talking, and, me and her talked about the whole situation, and we're like, you know what, we just need to wait. And at that moment, like we both just felt complete peace about the whole situation. And I guess that's the best way to, you know, to say it, just the peace that you feel. So.
Definitely. All right. So, We're gonna kind of start doing the transition back into fishing a little bit. Um,
All right.
are there any specific times out on the water that have affected your faith in any way?
Oh man. I've got to say, every time I'm out on the water at sunrise, like, man, it's a spiritual experience. Like being on the marsh at sunrise and catching a freaking huge fish. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, there's, I don't think there's any better worship service like on earth than being completely alone in nature and seeing the sunrise and then catching like a big, one of God's creations and like just admiring the beauty and then watching it swim off like the beautiful sunset. Actually, one of the memories that came up on Facebook today, I caught a trout on top water out in the marsh, man. And I was alone, like for miles. I was the only person out there, and the sunset was just overwhelming. It was just huge, and I was just reliving that memory, man. It was just pretty cool, you know. That especially sunrise and sunset are my favorite times to be out on the water, and honestly, it's a great time to pray, really, and to just meditate. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. So this has quickly become my favorite question to ask whenever I'm talking to somebody. But what fishing story or memory means the most to you?
Oh man, I've actually got a couple of these. So my dad's first kayak trip was probably, close to the top of the list, man. He's not a kayak guy. His joints are bad. He's got arthritis and stuff. But like when I got him out there on kayak and he's paddling around, and I don't even think we caught anything that day, but like we just took some pictures of pelicans and just spent time together and just having my dad on the water in a kayak. That was amazing. And you can't spend enough time with your family, with your dad, your mom, all these. And then my kids, their first fish in a kayak, that's going to stay at the top of my memory for sure. Like I've got 3 kids. So I've got 3 distinct memories of like their first fish out of kayak, and it was amazing. And then lastly, I gotta say this is probably at the bottom of the list. But I actually caught some tarpon, in my home state of Mississippi. And if you know anything about it, like there's not any tarpon in Mississippi. Oh, there's not supposed to be. So when I actually started like catching these fish and like targeting and actually catching several, like that's pretty big. So that's definitely got to be it, top 3. So
Heck yeah, man. One day I'm going to be out there somewhere and I'm going to catch a tarpon, or at least hook one long enough to see it jump out of the water.
oh man, there's nothing like it. The first one I hooked, like, oh dude, like that's all I could think about until I caught one. So, then when I caught one, that's all I could think about until I caught another one. So like, it's just an ongoing process, man. You never get done catching tarpon. They just eat the brain.
Yeah. All right, man. So this next question is actually a question that a friend of mine said. You know what? This is something that I think would be really cool to hear the answer to. And I've gotten some really interesting responses from it. But so you're out fishing with a fishing buddy. What is your typical conversation centered around?
Oh man, I think it really depends on who. My co-host Matt, man, me and him, when we go fishing, like 90% of the time, we're like making fun of each other. Like we're just cutting up, joking around, that sort of thing. And then when we actually catch a fish, like it turns completely, different. Well, it's all business then. We got to take pictures and, all these different things. But, really, one of our first podcasts was on the water, and you can catch some of that nonsense that we just do just on the water. And it was our very first episode we done it in the podcast, and we done it on the water. So, I guess that's a good way to actually see what we talk about. We just talk about anything random, like whatever comes to mind, and we're joking around most of the time. So,
All right. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you said that you were a father of 3. Is that right?
yeah, that's right.
All right. So, what life advice do you wish that you had been able to start off with, and that you and that you would like for your kids to be able to take on with them?
Well, first 12 months is not the same as cash. But seriously though, I'm learning from that one still. From back when I was a teenager, I'm still paying for stuff that I financed 12 months same as cash. Like, that was the dumbest thing ever. So definitely that. But in a more serious note, like, you can't control the circumstances that you're given, but you can control how you react to them. And man, if I'd have learned that a long time ago, I don't know. I just feel like things, could be completely different. Situational. You know what I'm saying? So definitely that. Like, you can't control what's happening to you, but you can control how you react to it.
Absolutely. And let's flip it around. What fishing advice do you wish you had been able to start off with, and that you want your kids to be able to take on with them?
Well, I got to borrow this one from Salt Strong, and once I learned this one, man, the light just clicked, and it was just like targeting fish so much easier. 90% of the fish are in 10% of the water, and it's really simple, but man, it's a difficult concept to grasp when you're just blind casting.
Yeah, absolutely. Any tips or secrets on how to find that 10%?
Yeah, man. Well, I know in saltwater, I'm always looking for ambush points, because every one of the fish I target, they're there to wait on food, and when it comes by, they're gonna ambush it. So I'm looking for cover, current flowing around points, drop offs, anything that you can imagine that a fish can hide behind and wait for bait to come past it. That's what I'm looking for, and that narrows it down. Choke points, any kind of current flowing over stuff. Current is the main thing, man. I'm always looking for current. When I see some kind of current that's different from like the regular tidal movements I'm seeing, that's what I'm going to key in on.
Okay, absolutely. And a lot of that can probably transfer over to freshwater too, especially on rivers, right?
Yeah. No, I've recently got a pretty strong love for rivers. Fishing in the Chattahoochee, fishing in Tennessee and different places. Man, I just really love fishing and moving water.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so what fish to catch would be sitting at the top of your bucket list?
Oh man, this one is very, very tough. And I couldn't narrow it down to one fish, so I'll just throw a couple of them up there. Taimen in Mongolia, roosterfish in Panama, arapaima in South America, mulloway in Australia, hermit bonefish in the Bahamas, and recently, man, and people laugh at me for saying this, but a sharkfin chubsucker in Alabama. I have found a creek with these jokers in it, and it's sharkfin chubsucker, and I want to catch one on the fly so bad, but I've only got one take out of like 150 to 200 casts on these things, and I'm sight fishing them, but I can't catch one. It is driving me insane. So I want to catch one so bad, and that's what's occupying my thinking space when it comes to fishing right now, is just catching one of these choke suckers. I get made fun of about that fish a
lot. Heck yeah, man. And you've already answered the next spot, or the next question, pretty much already, because that was going to be what fishing spot is at the top of your bucket list, but you named your spots with your fish. So
yeah, I'm not too, spots don't really matter to me. I really enjoy scenery, regardless of what it is. So
yeah, definitely. All right, so we are going to move into a segment here. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's called "What's Your Favorite?"
Okay.
And I'm going to be asking some questions, and you're just going to tell me your favorite in each category.
Okay.
All right. So, do you have a favorite scripture?
I have a favorite chapter, and that's going to be Psalms 91. And that, if you're not familiar, that's the protection chapter. And that's one that we pray over our family every morning. So definitely that one.
For sure. And Do you have a favorite Bible story?
Ah, hmm. Maybe maybe Jonah. You know, Jonah in the whale. I don't know. I guess a big fish story.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Right now, that one's my favorite too. Um, I've been rereading it a lot and getting a lot out of it. But yeah, man. So, what's your favorite fish to catch?
Um, Flounder. Oh, well, no, tarpon. Yeah, tarpon, flounder. Yeah,
Okay. Uh,
I like anything predatory.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So, what is it about the tarpon?
Man, tarpon are just so, I guess, majestic. Man, they call them a king. You know, the silver king for a reason. They jump, they put on a show, they head shake, and they're so hard to catch. Like 90% of the ones I hook, I don't catch. Like I don't even get close to catching. They'll jump a few times and they're off the hook. So I guess like the whole um pursuit of tarpon is what makes them so fun to catch and like just so maddening when they get off.
Yeah, for sure. And what about the flounder?
The flounder, man, they're so aggressive. Uh and they just lay on the bottom. And I think that's what I love about them. Like is when you're bumping along, like, you know, looking for flounder and one hits, it's like, okay, I'm fixing to turn my cameras on. I'm gonna tell everybody, hey, I got a flounder on and I'm fixing to set the hook. And then you can just count down to set the hook and that fish just goes nuts. I think that's what's great about it because they give you a little bit of time to like get everything set up and get the angles right on camera and everything before you like actually fight them. So,
Yeah, for sure. All the important stuff, right?
yeah, yeah, that's right.
All right. So, what's your favorite fish to fish for?
Um, let's see the target. Probably speckled trout, man, because they're ever. It's just a whole wealth of, you know, you can't ever learn speckled trout 100%. Like they're just the more you fish for them, the more you learn, the better you get. But there's always that bigger class of fish that you just move up to and start targeting them. So that's a never ending pursuit right there is catching bigger speckled trout.
Absolutely. So, what's your favorite fish to eat?
Um, I'm gonna have to say flounder on that one. They're good.
For sure, for sure. How you like your flounder cooked?
Any way they can be. I'm gonna sound like Forrest Gump, but stuffed flounder, baked flounder, fried flounder, filet, you know, whatever.
Absolutely. So, while we're on the subject of food, what's your favorite fishing snack?
Ah, definitely Old Bay big sunflower seeds.
Okay.
And I
Awesome.
know they're not good for me at all, but I love eating them. So,
Excuse me. All right. So, last one. Oh no, not last one. All right. So I'm not going to ask for any like specific GPS coordinates or ask you to give away any secret spots or anything. But what's your favorite body of water to fish on?
that's definitely going to be Bayou Combs. And and the reason being, man, we talked about my grandfathers being watermen, and that's where they both were like raised. That's where I was raised to fish. There's even some islands out there named after my grandparents, or not my grandparents, but my ancestors, you know, past them. So definitely that body of water. It's just there's just too many memories for it not to be at the top of the list.
Absolutely. And last one, for real this time. What's your favorite time of year to fish?
Um, Fall, without a doubt. That's when everything's in the tarpon are in. The flounder are chewing, ready to, you know, get bigger to go offshore to spawn. The specks are just on fire for the winter. Redfish are moving in a little bit further inshore. It's a magical time on the coast.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to start wrapping things up. So if you would, let us know what's coming up for you and for Brackish Coast Outdoors.
Sure. Well, we've kicked back off our YouTube, recently. I think we're 3 weeks in now, and kicking it back off for the year. And we're uploading some videos, some different fishing videos. Actually, tomorrow night, well, I don't know when the podcast is going to air. So the 17th of March is actually going to be the first fly fishing episode that's going to hit our channel. And then we're headed to the Chattahoochee River and Georgia and Alabama, the state line there, to catch shoal bass. And after that, we're trying to plan a trip to Louisiana, to Venice area for redfish and trout, maybe some offshore species. We might can go offshore. I'm not sure of the yet. And then we're going to be headed down to Miami at some point this year to catch peacock bass, snakehead, all the cichlids down there, hopefully bonefish permit, and snook and tarpon in the Everglades. And that's going to be on the YouTube. And then with our podcast, we've got some interviews coming up with, Kyle Johnson. If anyone's familiar with Speckled Truth, you know that name. And they're basically like trophy speckled trout purists. Like, those guys know their stuff about big trout. So that's going to be a really good one. And also in the hunting industry, if you've heard of Unguided Outdoors on YouTube, we're going to be interviewing one of the guys that started that. That's Kyle McDonald. And that's coming up. And we've got a few tarpon experts that we're trying to get on the show. So we'll see if that works out. But that's kind of the big things that are happening, for Brackish Coast. And hopefully that'll be good. So.
All right.
You can't ever tell what the fish are going to do. So I can't tell you that episodes are going to be good, but, we'll do our best.
Definitely. So do you have any sponsors or supporters that you would like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, man, there's, actually 4 companies, man, that support everything that we do with Brackish Coast. And I can call these guys. I know the owners. I could call them up and they'll just be like, what do you need? Here you go. Whatever. They're on board for everything we do. They see the vision that we have, and they just want to help. And that's Vibe Kayaks, Bending Branches Paddles, Savior Outdoors, and Groove Fishing. And man, I've stuck with a small group of companies, and it's worked out well. It's worked out very well for us.
All right. And if our listeners want to get in touch with you or follow you on social media, how do they find you?
All right. So on Facebook, it's going to be Brackish Coast Outdoors, for our business page. Obviously just Jeff Jones, for me. I'm the profile picture holding what looks like a humongous flounder, but it's actually a camera trick, but more about that later. And, actually on Instagram, Brackish Coast Outdoors, and on YouTube, we're just Brackish Coast. And then also you can read, articles that I put out monthly on the Angler app, or actually you can see our videos on there too, our YouTube videos on the Angler app, and the Coastal Angler Mississippi edition. You can read articles in there that I write every month. So.
All right, yeah, absolutely. That flounder. I actually heard about you for the first time on the Paddle and Fin podcast.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that, and that was how I found you. Was I was going through and I searched Jeff Jones. I was like, man, that does look like a giant.
Man, and what's crazy, that's not even my biggest flounder, like, ever. And people have commented on that, like, dude, did you turn that in for a state record? And like, man, that thing had to be 12 pounds. Like, well, actually it's just like 20 inches. And I never intended for that picture to turn out like as a complete hoax, but it did. And I was like, that's a pretty cool picture, so I'm just going to use it.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for asking me. So.
Another big thank you to Jeff for coming on the show and talking with us about his faith and his time out chasing the big ones on the Mississippi coast. If you want to know more about Jeff, check him and his co-host out on the Brackish Coast Outdoors podcast and on YouTube. As always, be sure to tune in next week for another awesome interview with another inspiring fisherman. Y'all take care, and God bless. Thanks for listening to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. If you like this episode, please give it a rating, a review, and make sure to subscribe on whatever app you're listening to so you never miss an episode. You can follow the podcast on social media at facebook.com/faithandfishingpodcast and Instagram at faithandfishingpod. Special thanks and a big shout out to our show sponsor, 413 Lure Company, to Jonathan Enthalancy for helping me write, play, and record the music for the show, and to Tyler Worrell, the graphic designer behind our amazing logo. If you have any questions about faith, I encourage you to contact a pastor in your community. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, get out there and catch some fish, and I will catch you on the next episode.